Hello, welcome back to my Rampa Curriculum Public Speaking Homeschooled lesson. Today I was asked to give a lecture on question and answers. So today Kai will be asking me questions about corsets and misconceptions about them and all the like. So
yeah. One of the questions is that corsets are sort of viewed as like this old-fashioned thing. And this is only worn like 1800, something like that. I'm not a fashion expert, so I don't know exactly when they started to fall out of fashion. But like, are corsets still worn today? Like, are they still like a part of the fashion industry, or not so much anymore?
So corsets, as you know, are not worn every day, and they've definitely fallen out of fashion. In the past few years, there's been a resurfacing of shapewear, which is more like a girdle because it doesn't have boning in it.
Yeah.
So it's just a stretchy piece of fabric that you basically put around you.
Yeah.
And
I've seen ads for shapewear and stuff like that too. It's wild.
It's not as reducing as corsets. And it can also be used, corsets are used medically still for people with spinal issues such as scoliosis. So there's special back braces and things like that that are essentially corsets, yes. Yeah. But they're not meant for the fashion, obviously. And that's always been a thing for medical corsets and things like that. And so
it kind of like vaguely reminds me of how treadmills used to be a torture device, and now we use them for exercise. And now it's like, oh, this used to be a medical thing, and now they start using it for like fashion and stuff.
Yes, so it's definitely, you can tell if you like watch New York Fashion Week or London Fashion Week, go to a museum of fashion, you'll definitely see corsets or corset-inspired things that are modern. And that's just because it's such an iconic thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That it's just still a part of fashion. So, yeah.
I mean, like, even, like, one of the scenes in, like, a Disney movie has, like, one of the characters putting on a corset and such like that. Like, it's still a very modern thing. And, okay, another one that I thought of is that a lot of people say that, like, corsets used to cause, like, medical issues and stuff, like messing with the spine or squishing organs. Is that true, or, like, and if so, in what capacity is that true? So, is it really as bad as everyone makes it out to be?
Essentially, this is one of the biggest misconceptions with historical reenactment and historical fashion and everything. Corsets are not unhealthy, and in fact, they are even more supportive and even better than modern undergarments, and they're used medically, so yeah, they really help, like, with posture and helping with things like that. And
maybe I should start wearing a corset because I keep slouching.
Corsets were not used necessarily for shapewear at first. They were, I believe they started in the 1600s as stays, which were lightly boned canvas, essentially corsets. And
they were like the pre-corset. Like, this is like corset 1.0.
Well, there's been like corsets throughout time, but this is when it's like in Western fashion definitely been like corset, and that was used just to support. And women were working and in the field and everything, and you wanted support.
Yeah.
And over time, when you start to get into the Victorian times, it got to be more shaping. You can see in the 1700s the sort of cone silhouette.
Yeah, which is always very weird to me whenever I see that. I'm just like, whoa.
And so as you go through to the Victorian times, you start to see, like, especially in Civil War era, you see the hourglass figure, and that's when that really comes into a thing. And there's different silhouettes of corsets, and people think, oh, they had such tiny, tiny, tiny waists. And that's not necessarily true, because fashion is about balance, and there were women who were massive that just, the balance made it look like their waists were absolutely tiny, you know? And there's people like modern day, they have tiny waists, put on a corset, they're tinier, Yeah. That's just how that works. Corsets have, and should have when you wear one, if you're just looking for a general corset, 0 to 1 inches of reduction. If you go farther, if you want the shaping of it, it's 3 to 4 inches of reduction, sometimes even 5 or 6, but that's for if you've done that before, you know? You don't want to start tight lacing then. And
because that would be an issue.
Yes, so tight lacing came into popularity in the early Edwardian era. So the 1890s to the 1910s, we get the S-bend corset, which isn't like our normal corsets where it's just an hourglass, It pushes the bust forward and pushes the hips back. So you get this S-bend.
Yeah, which looks very awkward to me, personally.
Yes, but,
especially if you look back at old, drawings of the time, of literal, cartoons at the time. It looks very awkward because, they're stylizing it.
Yeah, but, that's when you start to see records of it being unhealthy because there were women who tight-laced.
Yeah.
And tight-lacing is very safe and can be done safely, but if you do it in a certain way, 24/7, never take off your corset, constantly getting it tiny as tight as you can, that can cause issues. But it is very, very rare that organs would be misplaced or ribs changed or anything like that. That's just a misconception.
Yeah, old wives' tale, kind of.
Yeah, it's not an issue.
One thing that I wanted to mention was, you sort of covered this, but for example, in the movie Gone with the Wind, after Scarlett has her first baby and she's having the corset put on her, she's talking about, she'll never have, a 10-inch waist, I think is what she said, or, some ridiculously small number like that. And was that actually something that, younger women, strove to have at the time, about, of a waist about that size?
So, and I could be wrong about this is sort of a gray area for me. The average waist at the time, not really, because Gone with the Wind, that would be the Civil War, so we're talking 1860s. And so that's when it was still more supportive, definitely for shaping, but definitely, that's your support. And so it is possible if she had something like a 23-inch waist or a 22-inch waist, which is a normal waist measurement for smaller people. That with reduction,
just from looking at her, Scarlett looks pretty tiny. Her actress looks very small.
Yeah, because Vivien Leigh, who plays her, she's from the movies from the 1930s, and so they're small,
little bit babies.
But yeah, so she wouldn't have had a 16-inch waist, and so there's articles you can find about that. That's just a movie dramatization. That's not a thing.
Yeah, speaking of movie dramatization, that's how you say that word. In a lot of movies, one that comes to mind almost immediately is the Snow White adaptation Mirror Mirror, where there's a scene where the queen's got to get all dolled up for the prince and whatever, and they have her hooked up to this machine where they're tight lacing her corset. Was that actually something that happened? And was that something that happened, were there machines, or were they literally, putting a foot on the lady's back, pulling to get it that tight?
That would not have been a thing. So it's definitely a common thing to need help. No, not a trope, but just a thing to need help to get a corset on. When I've put on corsets, I've done it by myself just fine, but I wasn't going for the silhouette, I was just going
for just, the style corset. Of it, really.
I wasn't going for tight lacing, and so if your corset fits in such a way that you need to put your foot on the back and pull so hard that way, it's not a good corset.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
And it's not the right size, and corsets should fit. That's when you get the dangers too, is when your corset doesn't fit. And so it's very easy to fit a corset, but you gotta make sure you have the right one for you.
You say that as a seamstress, so it's easy to fit. One thing that you also mentioned a lot was boning. I know that they used whalebone and stuff like that in corsets, but were there any other substitute materials that people used to use?
So, whaleboning was used, as I mentioned before, the stays, they were boned with reeds. And so it was dried reeds, and there's the buskin front where you see the hook closure. That sometimes it's just laced at the back, and so you don't have the buskin front. And there's a name for it that escapes me, but it would be wood, carved wood, just straight wood thing, and so that was very common in the 1700s, 16 to 1700s, into the early 1800s, I believe, too. And then it was, as you move into the Victorian times, you got into spiral steel boning, flat steel boning, and, a lot of metal Reed
It's
is
not like whales grow on trees.
Yes, reed is regarded as, and whalebone is expensive.
Yeah.
You know.
Not to mention, I think kind of illegal to get now.
Yeah, you can't get it now, but there's synthetic whalebone, which you can think of.
Which is basically just like plastic, right?
Yeah, so it's plastic. That's a common one now is plastic. There's types of boning, Ridgeline, plastic boning, you know. Sorry, my dog
is heck.
My dog's whining. See, that's the thing. Plastic is brittle. And so reeds, they warm up to your body and they are regarded as the most comfortable.
Oh yeah, so, because it'd probably be a little bit easier for them to like bend into your shape.
Yes, because they warm with the body heat and sort of curve and they're really comfortable.
Alright.
But the plastic, as you know, not breathable. It's plastic.
Yeah, it's plastic. Gosh dang it. It's some dense, hard stuff.
Yes, and so you have to. And it's brittle, it breaks easy, it's not as supportive. Synthetic whalebone is, but if you get something like Ridgeline, that's meant to be used in a dress to add a bit of shape, but not for corsets, you know? So it was found in girdles and things like that because it was regarded as more comfortable than metal, which I find not to be the case.
This is not related to corsets in any way, but the word girdle just makes me laugh so much whenever I hear it.
So is that all your questions?
I actually have one more. Because when you look at women's undergarments now, they tend to be, you know, like they're decorative or lacy and whatever. Was that ever a thing with corsets, or were they always just like plain whatever?
So that all depends. That all depends, and so 1600s, obviously, it's a work garment.
So you don't want to get your fancy work garment dirty.
Yeah, so it would have been cotton duck, which is a thicker cotton sort of canvas, you know.
That just made me think about a duck made out of cotton. And it's like, oh, it's so cute.
And then it was regarded, like, later on, if you had a nice one, you had silk or a cotton silk mix, satin, things like that. So it definitely was a thing, especially, again, as you move into the Edwardian times when the corsets really became, like, when we think of a corset, we think of Edwardian corsets. Yeah. It's regarded as Victorian, it's mostly Edwardian.
Yeah. You're saying all these things, and I'm like, yes, I understand. But, like, with these timelines, it's a little hard to keep track of what.
Yeah, so the Edwardian is after Victorian. That is the 1890s to the 1920s.
Oh, okay.
So
all right, that I can envision in my head.
1920s, you know, the corset sort of cut off.
Yeah, sort of like whatever, because a lot of
the flapper movement.
Yeah, because, you know, it's like freedom, like, I don't need this, but rip it off, throw it around.
And so, yeah, that's when that happened.
One more question. We mentioned, like, the boning and whatever, but what kind of fabric were these usually made out of? Like, were they made out of, like, canvas or what, or cotton or wool or what?
So, like I said before, it was cotton duck, cotton canvas, but it can be made out of silk.
Ooh.
It's more expensive to be made out of silk.
Yeah, I think I remember, like, in books, we were talking about, like, yes, beautiful silk corset and whatever.
Usually you want to line it with something heavier if you do something like silk, because silk is strong, but often it's a silk satin or silk taffeta, and that's not quite as strong.
Yeah. And also kind of weird to the touch, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, do you have any more questions?
No, that's all I got on corsets, really.
Well, thank you for going to this talk, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.